and welcome to those of you joining us live, and a big hello to those of you watching this Intellectiv discussion on demand. I'm Dan Glicksman, Marketing Director and Communities Leader at CDM Media, and I'll be helping lead today's discussion as being held in partnership with our good friends, Informatica from Salesforce. So for years, technology leaders have been asked how quickly they can deploy new technology. Today, the question's changing. It's not longer, can we build it? It's increasingly, should we build it? How should we govern it? And who's accountable when something goes wrong? AI is moving from a productivity tool to a decision-making tool. It's influencing hiring, customer experiences, financial decisions, cybersecurity operations, countless other business operations. As AI's influence grows, so does the importance of trust, transparency, data quality, and governance. So today's discussion is not just about slowing innovation, it's about creating the conditions that allow innovation to scale safely, sustainably, and with confidence. So let's explore what reasonable AI leadership looks like when the pressure to move fast has never been greater. Here to discuss this is a fantastic panel. We're just going to start first with introductions. Sandeep, I'll have you kick things off.
Thank you, Dan, for the opportunity here. I am Sandeep Ahluwalia. I am with the Global Technology, Data, and AI Executive at Citi. Most of my work sits at the interaction of business strategy and technology transformation. These days, the focus is mostly on the AI and the data components of it. End of the day, it is all about helping large-scale global organizations do complex transformations and scale them up. So that's where I am, and happy to be part of this conversation.
We're happy as well. Thank you, Sandeep. Deepak.
Hey, Dan, and thank you for inviting us. My name is Deepak Kunale. I'm currently a partner at Cognizant Consulting, leading their agentic AI and responsible AI practice. In this role, I work with quite a few financial services organizations in standing up responsible AI governance. I've been an operator on the other side, was a chief data and AI officer at a couple of large firms, Northern Trust and Schwab, and prior to that with Deloitte, doing a lot of work related to regulators. So as we move towards this agentic AI practice, I've kind of seen the bruises of what it means to be responsible in an enterprise setting, and happy to contribute to this conversation here.
Deepak, welcome. Thank you so much. Shiva.
Hi. Good afternoon. This is Shiva Mathur. I am part of Teleperformance. I lead global AI and analytics practice for Teleperformance. We have been center of some of the large enterprises globally, and my responsibility is to bring corrective AI, agentic AI, and other services to our large global customers and provide value to their end clients at the end of the day. So thanks, Dan, for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Shiva, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the conversation. And Joseph.
Hey, thank you for having me. So I'm Joseph Bracken. I was the intellectual property, product, privacy, and AI lawyer for Informatica, an enterprise B2B software and SaaS company. We were acquired last year by Salesforce, so now I handle privacy and AI legal matters for Salesforce. So that includes both internally helping on AI deployments, as well as working with our product team and working with customers to help them understand how their use of our solutions can help their compliance efforts.
All right, Joseph, welcome and thank you. All right, let's jump right on in. So historically, governance has been viewed as a control function, a necessary guardrail. We hear that word often. But as organizations race to operationalize AI, some leaders are beginning to argue that strong governance actually accelerates adoption because it creates confidence. Has AI governance become a competitive advantage, or is it still primarily viewed as a compliance exercise inside your organization? And Shiva, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And not for the reason most people think about. In the past, people have viewed predominantly governance as more like a corporate break. So, being in a large enterprise organization, I can see that there can be a lot of hindrance to those things. But I think slowly it has come down, and it's designed more as a accelerator and a much more better governance model to really provide value and insight to the clients and their ecosystem. In my opinion, if you don't have a very structured framework to audit your data, your models, your ecosystem, you definitely cannot scale up altogether. And that is some of the conversations which we have been having with some front end with some of our large clients. So that's somewhere is what is needed because of the legal and compliance team are terrified, like, hey, can anything we can push into the production? No, you can. If you have a right framework, if you have right kind of data sets, you can definitely do that. So in my opinion, I think it's becoming a very competitive advantage altogether.
Thank you, Shiva. Deepak, how about you?
No, certainly. I mean, I think I started out as a governance person, right? And in those days, we used to do regulatory activities, and it was kind of more of a compliance regulatory check mark. In this new world where AI is being deployed at scale and AI itself is considered a competitive advantage. It differentiates, and what we are seeing invested in responsible AI are able to accelerate deployment by up to 40%. Because trust cannot be built or cannot be retrofitted after the fact, after the POC is over, essentially is what most clients are finding out. So in that way, it is a competitive advantage. And secondly, most of the foundational models and kind of AI will be deployed in every organization. What differentiates you from others, right? What differentiates you from the others is trustworthy outcomes and being able to address the privacy, transparency, explanatory aspects of it. So in that aspect, we definitely are seeing that AI governance is becoming a competitive advantage.
All right, thank you, Deepak. So almost every company claims to support responsible AI, but definitions, they vary widely. Some focus on fairness and bias, others prioritize transparency, explainability, privacy, or even security. My question is, how does your organization define responsible AI, and what principles have become non-negotiable as you scale AI initiatives? And Deepak, I'm going to come back to you on this one.
So, as you rightfully said, Dan, responsible AI means different things to different organizations, right? There are already some risk appetites and risk frameworks that are in place in terms of safety, transparency, privacy of the data itself. I'll talk about one of the places I ran a large-scale data and AI organization. Privacy was paramount to that. So that was an extremely critical part of responsible AI in terms of making sure we are safeguarding the information that we are providing to the AI models. We also looked at, depending on what types of decisions you're doing, explainability of those decisions and transparency in terms of the data set that's being used, and accountability for the actual eventual decisions that were being made was extremely crucial part of it, because ultimately AI can do oopsie, humans cannot, or a lot of the financial organizations cannot. So that's what eventually it means from a responsible AI perspective. In terms of operationalizing this, that's where the rubber meets the road, right? You can deploy these things in multiple POC settings, but unless there is somebody accountable, somebody who can explain how AI made that decision, and you're safeguarding the information. And in one of the examples that we used, kind of bias was important and things of that nature, right? In terms of safety of the data and safety of the outcomes itself. So that's what responsible AI means in reality for most financial services organizations. We work with within their existing risk framework so that we can customize essentially what it means for every organization.
Excellent. Sandeep, is there something you would like to add on to this?
Yes, I think Deepak covered all the some of the key talking points, right? In my experience, where I want to add to it is that, the approach which we are using at Citi, which is a big global financial firm, is definitely the shared responsibility model, because there is no one person. It's a very horizontal function, AI governance, right? So most of the teams have to be involved in it. What I want to really talk about is the non-negotiable principles, right? The non-negotiable principles are definitely going to be the mandatory safety guardrails, right? Your integration has to be there. Then what we are doing is that because we have global jurisdiction and then the regulations have not evolved so far and it's evolving landscape, right? So what we are focusing on is regulatory by design. So build it to a higher standard so that we are able to adapt easily to all of the regulatory landscape as it catches up. And definitely, as Deepak pointed it out, right, clear accountability is always the key, because without accountability, if everybody owns it, nobody owns it. So we definitely put clear accountability.
Fair, that totally makes sense. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Getting into data. So many AI discussions focus on models, they focus on algorithms. If poor data quality may create more business risk than the models themselves. So when evaluating AI risk, how much of the challenge is actually an AI problem versus a data problem? Joseph, you want to take a shot at this?
Yeah, and so for sure, I think that's right. That, today we're going to talk about a lot of things that have to be done right when you deploy AI, the different ways that it can go wrong. I think the most critical one, by far, the one that really underlies all the others, is data quality. And we've sort of alluded to it already, right? Deepak just talked about, in the context of what ethical AI is, the importance of avoiding bias. Well, but what's the origin of bias? It's often going to be poor quality data. There is real liability for AI systems that don't use good data. And when we see liability for AI systems, almost always that root cause is going to be poor or biased data. And there are a lot of examples of this. The ACLU filed a complaint with the EEOC, that's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in the US, that said essentially a speech recognition feature of an AI screening tool from a company called HireView had discriminated against the speech patterns of a hearing impaired Indigenous applicant. Last year, there was a class action that was certified for allegations that a different AI hiring tool, this was from Workday, was discriminated on the basis of age. Now, I have no idea whether those claims have any merit, right? They have not been resolved yet. There are a lot of other claims, especially around use for employment, but not exclusively. But those allegations, if they were substantiated, would go directly to whether that training and testing data set was really biased. So yeah, I think data quality is huge. You can do everything else right, but if you have poor data for training or even for operation of the system, you're probably going to have liability on the other end.
All right, thank you, Joseph. Deepak, do you have something you'd like to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as Joseph and Sandeep talked about, see, the foundational models in the agentic AI systems are getting more commodity, right? Everybody is using the same models. Essentially, what differentiates one organization from the other is the context in which the models operate, and context is where data comes in, right? As in, that's the input you provide, and then you have evaluation frameworks. Unless the data is right, it's kind of, we have this thing, we used to call it garbage in, garbage out. In this case, it's garbage in, hallucinations out, right? And you don't even know whether it's hallucinating or not. That's the new reality in this case. So being able to trace the data quality, do the lineage, figuring out what's the context to be provided to the models, and then having good guardrails that Sandeep talked about on the other side to do the evaluation framework and monitor the drift. That's where the smart money in the valley is going. I mean, we are obviously in the financial services specter. We are trying to kind of follow along, but data remains more important than ever, and that's what's going to help differentiate you even further when in the world that everybody's using the same models, everybody's using the same hyperscalers, and you need to find a way to kind of make it more trustworthy.
Yeah, let me stick in on that, because I think Deepak makes a good point. And if the people who are listening to this sort of feel some pressure when they understand what you have to do, they should, right? Because it's hard, right? You've got to track the provenance of your data, you've got to test it, validate it, you got to monitor it, right? Essentially, for as long as that AI system remains in use. And this is kind of why companies don't want to do this, right? Organizations want AI to make their lives easier, their tasks easier. And when you think about what you've got to do it right, it seems like a lot of work. Now, there are a lot of tools that can help, right? The companies I've been involved with sell tools to help this. But trying to take those shortcuts on the front end because you think AI is going to be easy, in a lot of cases is going to leave you with something unusable at the back end.
Great point, Joseph. Excellent. Thank you. All right. I mentioned this earlier. AI increasingly crosses organizational boundaries. IT, security, risk, legal, data, compliance, HR, business units. They all have a stake in AI outcomes. So who should ultimately own AI governance? And how do you prevent accountability from becoming fragmented? Sandeep, I'll let you kick off with this one.
So, great question, Dan. AI governance, as we just discussed, right? There is no single person or organization, who can own AI governance. It is a shared responsibility because it is a horizontal function. And the real challenge here is the fragmented accountability. So where most leaders are going wrong these days is they are focusing so much only on the technology aspects of AI, right? Which is only one component. Before you even roll the technology out, right, you have to think about these other aspects of who approved it, who created it, who approved it, all the guardrails and everything, right? But even beyond that, right, when it comes to governance, right, there is this other aspect of it, right, that have your operating model evolved, right? Have your roles and responsibilities evolved, because now you're fundamentally doing things differently. So all of those things have to factor in. That's what I would say, when we talk about AI governance, it's more of an horizontal function and it needs to be factored into your operating model.
All right, thank you, Sandeep. Deepak, is there something you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, I think Sandeep is right on. We use, over the last 20 years, we had similar questions regarding data, right? Who owns data? Data is owned by everybody and nobody wants to own it because it's too hard to maintain, as Joseph mentioned. AI makes it even harder because the stakes are much higher. Essentially, in this case, who owns the actions? How do we make sure that the context is appropriate? Now, in these cases, I think in case of AI, the visibility is increased to the C-suite. So there is more buy-in and more support that everybody should be owning AI. Now, actually making it a reality within an enterprise setting is more of a art than science, I would say. There is a horizontal functionality, but where we started to see this work is when the hub and spoke kind of approach works, where there is a hub of horizontal capabilities and spokes are within each business unit and within each area, and everybody feels like they own certain part of the AI decisioning that relates to their own accountability structure. I did set up a couple of AI governance councils with different compositions given the organizational operating model and how the organization is actually structured. Is one trump the other? I don't think so. It really depends on how the organization's decision-making hierarchy works today and how you can mirror AI governance to essentially intersect with it. Easier said than done. I think that's where the art and science of this lies.
Yep, fair point. Good, Sandeep?
Yeah, I'll just add to that, right? The way we are approaching it is that, as they say, right, think globally but act locally. So that's the model, right? Okay, what are the guardrails for the platform teams? What are the guardrails for the development teams who are building those agents, right? What are those accountability framework for the teams who have to maintain it? So I think you have to look at it at different levels and, create that operating model which will complement each other rather than compete with each other.
Excellent, great point. So let's talk explainability. Customers, regulators, employees, and boards are increasingly asking for explainability. At the same time, organizations worry about exposing intellectual property or creating operational complexity. So what level of explainability should organizations provide for AI-driven decisions? And how do you determine when an explanation is sufficient versus unnecessarily exposing proprietary processes? And Joseph, I'm going to turn this to you.
Yeah, so I think every AI system provider is struggling with this issue right now. And look, technically it's difficult, right? AI is in some effects a black box. So explainability is inherently a hard problem to solve. There's also sort of a trade-off between the precision in the information that you give the user and ensuring that the information you give is and remains accurate. These are hard requirements increasingly. So the EU AI Act is going to require both explainability and interpretability for high-risk AI systems. And so explainability is like why a decision was reached. Interpretability is more like how that decision was reached. And explainability generally has to be given to the data subjects affected by the decision. Interpretability is more something that's going to be of interest on the technical side. Let's say the customers of the system are going to want to understand as they decide how to deploy it. In the US, there are a lot of laws that are now requiring explainability. There's a revised Colorado AI Act that is going to go into effect early next year. There's even in local New York City law. The best way, I think, to answer your question, Dan, to understand sort of what the requirements really are, is to look at how these obligations are being litigated. There have been a number of cases that have adjudged whether an explanation was sufficient or not. I think the most prominent was something from the European Court of Justice that found that, I think it was Dun & Bradstreet, was not able to invoke trade secrets as a broad defense against explainability. The takeaway from that case, and I think this is probably the best guidance to follow right now, and I should give the clarification, look, this is all very domain specific, right? And the answer when you're dealing with highly sensitive information is going to be very different than if you just are dealing with, a video game or something like that. Generally, the provider needs to give enough information, not just to identify the factors that are involved, but generally how they were weighted, right? Which were the important factors and which weren't. And to give that data subject, the person affected by the decision, enough information to understand what they could have done or how things could have changed to give a different result. If you're doing those, you're probably okay under the law right now. But for sure, this is the kind of thing that is going to change with time, right? We're going to get a refined understanding as more cases happen, as more of these laws go into effect, especially in 2027.
All right, thank you, Joseph. We're going to steer a little bit towards agentic AI. So many governance frameworks are designed for analytics and traditional machine learning. Autonomous agents introduce a different level of complexity because they can take actions, not just provide recommendations. My question is, do existing governance frameworks adequately address agentic AI, or do we need an entirely new approach? Shiva, I'm going to let you take this one.
I think it has to be I was hearing everybody out here. I think everybody is saying, right, depending upon the explainability, observability, and transparency, I think it has to be a different kind of a viewpoint to make sure that data is synchronized, data is mature, the data is being captured in the right manner. And there's a proper amount of framework which can really provide a better insights to the people. So in my opinion, it has to be a different kind of a viewpoint rather than the standard way of how people are approaching the earlier activities. That's what I will say.
All right, thank you, Shiva. Deepak.
No, definitely, I agree with Shiva. I mean, existing governance structures were kind of what I call more defensive oriented, right? To advise and, hope for the best and, do the compliance checklists. The agentic AI is fundamentally different. It can act, and it can act in real time. And the time for governance is not after it has acted. The time for governance is in the flow, right? So the models have to evolve, and that goes inside the operating model, right? Essentially, who are these governance people? We used to have governance folks in the past who were, I used to hire a data governance team. In this case, everybody's in governance roles. That's what we call human in the loop today, essentially. And sometimes, and a lot of times, they don't understand their governance responsibilities, right? Essentially, kind of all the things we talked about: transparency, bias, being able to validate the responses, especially when they're coming from models like LLMs, which fundamentally are black box. And then secondly, they are also authorized to work autonomously, right? They are not just kind of providing you a dashboard and kind of saying, hey, look at it and act on it, right? That's what used to happen in the past. So the governance models fundamentally have to shift and change. What does governance even mean also had to change? I mean, I think I'm starting to see governance starts to intersect with what is an operating model for an organization, right? How do you operate, right, as an organization? What are your business processes? How do you do quality control? How do you make sure that information is collected appropriately and then acted on appropriately? So the speed is kind of expanding vastly, I would say, from a governance perspective. And alongside that, it needs fundamentally different approach to how you govern agentic AI.
Yeah, and just to add what Deepak was saying, we have to make sure that there are two different elements are captured very well. Who's responsible for the governance process and who's accountable for the governance process as well, because both the models and both the approaches are very, very different in an organization, especially the large enterprise. So any and everybody owns a governance model? I don't think so. But at the same time, who's accountable and responsible has to be really carved out to make sure that it is all captured in the right manner.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about AI governance structure. So what governance model has been the most effective in your experience, and what lessons have you learned from structures that didn't work? Joseph, you want to take this?
Sure. So I've been a few different places that we talked about. So I think the right governance really depends on the organization and the goals. So too little governance obviously can be a problem, right? And we've sort of talked about that your AI projects can be untrustworthy, right, or even unlawful. Too much governance can be a problem too. It's obviously a problem if it consumes resources that would be better spent in the organization. The worst case, I think, is if you put a governance structure in place, you don't have the resources to follow it, and then you're not doing what your policies say. When something goes wrong, I think that's the worst situation to be in. So you really have to kind of get that right. Salesforce has something called an Office of Ethical and Humane Use. And I've been very impressed, right? It really helps the organization make good, responsible, considered decisions. But I think that wouldn't be possible at a lot of other organizations with fewer resources, right? It wouldn't be possible where I'd been previously. Here's what I think helps. So the other panels have already talked a lot about accountability, and I think that's critical, right? You've got to have accountability in any governance structure you set up. A few other things that I think really help, it needs to be multidisciplinary. And I think that's implicit in some of your earlier questions. Look, lawyers are not going to be the best judge of security risks. Security experts are not going to be the best judge of what technical debt you take on when you decide to deploy an AI project. You really need to make sure that all the stakeholders and all the right expertise are involved. Something kind of what we already talked about, you really want to implement based on a framework. Take a look at, especially if you're a US organization, the NIST AI risk management framework is excellent. If you're a more internationally focused organization, something like ISO, maybe ISO 42001 is a great place to start. But it helps you make sure that you're getting a good 30,000 foot view of all the considerations. You're not trying to discover everything for yourself and down the road figure out that you missed some important considerations. The last point I think that's important is really flexibility. So AI is different now with different considerations than it was 3 years ago. I think where a lot of our organizations began our AI journeys was essentially bolting AI analysis on top of data privacy analysis, right? 10 years ago, we started to take data privacy very seriously. We set up reviews, we set up procedures and policies. And then when AI became a big issue, we said, hey, we'll use those same processes to analyze AI. I think that worked for a while, but as time has gone on, AI has become more of a specialty with unique concerns and especially unique skills that you need to analyze it. It may be time to move beyond that.
All right, thank you, Joseph. So measuring trust. We know executives can measure ROI, productivity, cost savings. Trust, just far harder to quantify, yet arguably just as important. How do you measure whether employees, customers, stakeholders, they actually trust the AI systems that your organization deploys? Sandeep, I'll have you take this one if that's okay.
Trust definitely is not a single matrix, right? And it is not something which you can measure directly, but there are definitely measurable signals which you should focus on. And as you rightfully said, right, if you're focusing on your customers or your employees, right, the right questions to ask is that, what are those measurable signals? If you have deployed AI enabled features, are your customers using them? Okay. If you are if you have deployed these same AI capabilities for their employees, right? Do they continue to get productivity out of it? Similarly, right, it's not just the positive signals, right? Are your customers even coming back, right? You deploy a chat feature, right? Initial there is a spike, people get, but are they continuously retaining that? They keep coming back to it? If they keep coming back to it, that means they see value in it, right? So those are some of the signals you should measure. And I would not only say look at the positive signals. Sometimes, looking at the negative signals is also a good indication of trust. If you're getting too many complaints, too many escalations, right? That is a very good signal to say that your trust is eroding. So I think it's a combination of these things. Ultimately, what I will say is that, it doesn't matter what organizations say about AI. It is how the people use AI, which dictates, how you're building that trust in the organization.
Great point, Sandeep. Deepak, you have something you'd like to add?
No, I'll just add on Sandeep's point of view here. Ultimately, when we deployed a couple of these systems, we knew that the system was becoming trustworthy when portfolio managers stopped doing their own Excel spreadsheet math behind the scene and essentially kind of trusting the output that the AI system was providing. And that's when we started to see kind of the adoption kind of increase, right? So eventually it comes down to the human behavior at the end of the day on what they're doing with the information that AI is providing, especially in regulatory settings like these. And behind the scene, there's a number of signals that you can measure, right? Adoption rates, telemetry that you provide in terms of observability and other things. But trust is earned over a period of time, and trust can only be measured through, that's probably one concept that even AI is struggling with modeling. Kind of when do you trust somebody when you have an implicit trust and you don't kind of go back and verify every outcome.
All right, thank you, Deepak. So, do you believe emerging AI regulations will ultimately accelerate adoption through trust or slow innovation through complexity? Joseph, you want to lead off with this one?
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer, right? Sort of both, and maybe they're in a race. We're at an interesting point right now because in 2023, 2024, there were a lot of prominent AI laws that were passed, right? In Europe, everyone I think is probably familiar with the EU AI Act to some extent. Colorado passed a comprehensive AI law. California passed a flurry of maybe, I think, 18 different AI laws were passed in 2024. What we're seeing now, though, is that a lot of that is getting sort of whittled away, right? So Europe delayed the EU AI Act provisions on high-risk AI, which is sort of the most impactful provisions as part of their digital omnibus. And Colorado really rewrote their law. Both of these laws should either be the high-risk provisions of the EU AI Act, I think, were supposed to be in effect in August of this year. Colorado's law was supposed to be in effect in February. Both of those have been delayed until 2027. And the reason they've been doing this is concerns that they would impact AI development too much. That's interesting because I think the general public is becoming more fearful of AI at the same time that in many cases legislatures are becoming more fearful of impeding the development of AI. In the absence of getting really useful legislation in place, a lot of what we've done instead has been relied on regulators or simply private enforcement. So California has done a few different things, right? Gavin Newsom issued an executive order for AI safety. Their civil rights division had some rules around automated decision-making that were issued last fall. Even the White House issued an executive order. You may have all seen this. It made a lot of news just a week or two ago about, it essentially was driven by concerns about this mythos model, right? And encouraging companies to voluntarily share new models with the government 30 days before release. There have also been a lot of regulatory enforcement actions. The FTC has been pretty aggressively going after companies that misrepresent how good their AI is, which maybe ties back again to data quality concerns. If you put out marketing that overpromises how well your AI is going to do, that could be an unfair and deceptive trade practice. I know in at least Texas and Florida, the attorney generals have gone after different AI companies. So we're certainly seeing a lot of, if not formal legislation, we're seeing regulatory action, we're seeing things that are helping to sort of push along these public concerns. Where is it going to end up? I think there needs to be regulation, right? The public is concerned about AI, and in order to generate that trust, we're going to have something. The worst case outcome is probably this patchwork of different requirements and different enforcement priorities across different jurisdictions. What we'd probably like to see would be some federal legislation. There is enough concern on both sides of the aisle in the US that you would think we could get that done. But look, a decade ago, we were in the same place with respect to data privacy, and we never got federal legislation. So I think if we come up with some strong, comprehensive AI regulation, that's going to be better for both producers and consumers of AI services. Where we may end up with really different and changing rules, I think may end up being worse for both.
All right, thank you, Joseph. Sandeep, would you like to add to that?
This is very close to me. So first of all, let me start with this, right? Regulations build trust, and trust is the foundation of AI. So there's no argument there. What creates the complexity is what Joseph accurately described, right? All this patchwork of regulations, right? California is coming up with some requirements, EU is coming up with some requirements, right? So being on this side of, wearing that delivery hat, right? Where we have to roll out AI products and we are dealing with all of these complexity, definitely, I would say, creates hurdles and slows us down. So the solution to all of this is definitely, I don't know if federal legislations are the way to go about it, but what organizations can do till, the regulatory bodies catch up with all of that is just build to higher standards. So that's why, I go back to my original point, which I mentioned earlier, is like regulatory by design. Design it to higher standards, right? So that you can meet with all of these regulatory requirements which are coming through.
All right, thank you, Sandeep. Anybody else have anything to add?
No, I mean, I totally agree with Sandeep, right? Patchwork is difficult, but I think in terms of regulations for AI, it has such profound impact that regulations are a must. And I think it also will help the enterprises, because a lot of the enterprises and a lot of companies, they create very interesting pilots that never scale, never see the light of the day. And it's kind of the pilot purgatory. If they were designed to this higher standard, as Sandeep talked about, and with AI governance in mind, you would actually see higher degree of impact. So it will be a short-term pain, but I think long-term, every organization will essentially benefit from having these standards and being able to actually leverage AI in responsible ways, as well as being able to scale it to actually deliver impact.
Yeah, I think that's right. And one of the ways you can tell that's right is that even the big AI foundation model providers are now advocating for some form of AI legislation or AI regulation, right? They understand that it's in their long-term interest as well. Now, they may not be advocating for extremely strong regulation, but they do want something. They clearly think that it's in everyone's interest for there to be more regulation in the race right now.
All right, so as our AI tools become incredibly smart and reliable, performing complex tasks perfectly, how do we stop ourselves from just blindly trusting them, making sure that we humans, that we don't get lazy or lose our sharp judgment, especially when stakes are high, such as critical decisions or impactful outcomes. Excuse me, Sandeep, you want to take a shot at this?
Yes. One challenge, which is not getting enough attention in all of the, media today is how do we preserve human judgment as AI becomes increasingly capable and trusted? If I were to look back, right, we have seen versions of this, right? Once we started using GPS, right, kids don't know how to read maps. We started using calculators, mental math skill is gone. So I think we have a risk of falling into a trap of what I call the automation complacency. People will become so comfortable getting the recommendations from AI and using them that they will stop challenging it. So, in order for that, the way I look at it is that, in order to not fall into that automation complacency trap, we have spent so much time training the AI. Now we need to spend equal amount or maybe more amount of time in training people how to effectively use AI. That part has to be balanced out, and and then there has to be some talk and some focus in whether it's in organization or whether it is in the industry. We have to focus on that aspect as well.
Thank you, Sandeep.
Because we want
to sorry.
No, that critical thinking, judgment, those skills are a must-have.
It's exactly what I was going to add. Critical thinking skills. I hear that everywhere I go. So that's a great point. Anybody else have anything to add to that? If not, we'll finish up with our last question, kind of a gaze into the crystal ball. I always like to end with something like this. So the pace of AI advancement continues to outstrip organizational readiness. Leaders are making decisions today that have long-term implications. So what AI ethics or governance challenge do you believe organizations are underestimating today? Something that's going to be a major issue over the next 3 years. Shiva, I'll start with you on this one.
Sure. I think the thing right now, I was listening to Sandeep and as well as Deepak. I think the shift, what we are looking from a passive kind of a business model to an autonomous agentic AI, it has to happen. There's no way out not going on. But the problem out here, which I see is, when we are talking about 2 or 3 years down the lane, about how multi-agents are interconnected to each other for a decision-making model with the lack of governance and other thing, that scares the hell out of me. You are talking about completely like a butterfly effect. If one model makes a wrong decision altogether, it can have an implications on all the models which are related or interrelated altogether. So how do we have that thing in better control? Can be a governance, can be a more of a regulatory activities, can be teaching the right kind of a model for a human to be really looking into all the aspects. I think that systematic drift and that systematic approach is really, really, really needed altogether. And that's going to be, in my opinion, I think majority of the time and effort will be going towards that angle altogether. I mean, 10 years down the lane, we were all, if you want to know something, let's Google it. Google became a word in the dictionary. I think, in my opinion, the AI will become a word in the dictionary too very soon. So how do we keep up with that pace? I think that's will be very much required, in my opinion.
All right, thank you, Shiva. Deepak, how about you?
Well, I guess as a father of a daughter who's about to get to college, right? And I'm about to spend all this money on kind of picking the path. That's what currently personally keeps me up at night. We used to have a pretty straightforward path. This is what you do, and this is the type of life you see. I don't see that as clearly for my daughter, and I like the point of view that Sandeep mentioned, right? How do we maintain that curiosity, critical thinking, maintain control, especially for future generations? I think that's going to be extremely important. And then secondly, for the enterprises themselves, right? In the world where, there's these headless operations, as they call it right now, right? No human is consuming it. On the other side is another agent consuming information from an agent that your enterprise might be running, what differentiates you, what runs, like what keeps you up, like what are the safeguards in the system to make this not spy of control, right? I mean, all of those science fiction movies, essentially, I mean, those are, as much as, some of that looks like science fiction, I recently saw this movie called WALL-E again, and I think it was very interesting to see a parallel between how we are using today, right, within Cognizant, let's just say Claude, and how much output do I see from my own team that comes out of Claude. Mm-hmm. And nobody's even looked at that outcome, right? And then who's doing the thinking, right? Who's actually providing that guidance, and who's actually making sure that this is something that sticks and actually is safe and transparent and responsible and accountable. So that's what keeps me up at night. I mean, I don't know the answers to a lot of the questions I raised here, but this is a continuous journey for sure.
Love the WALL-E reference. Love it. Sandeep, how about you?
I think, I agree to the comments made all by my fellow peers, right? We have to talk about, which was the theme of this as well, right? Responsible AI, future generation, how do we evolve our operating model for the enterprises? So there are all these tiny little aspects, right? Which you put and bundle together to see. End of the day, it is going to be, we don't have a very predictable way of knowing, how all these things are going to evolve. So adapting to new ways of working and what that new way of working looks like, is going to be, something which we all need to constantly evaluate, take the feedback, reiterate. It's going to be a journey for all of us. Nobody has a crystal ball at this point, not to my knowledge.
I'd be a wealthy person if mine was working. So thank you, Sandeep. And Joseph, why don't you bring us home?
Yeah. So and you've all got me worried now about my lack of critical thinking skills from using AI now. You're right. I think I know one phone number, which is my own, and I couldn't imagine having to memorize a 10-digit number now for someone else. And I can't drive a car without my GPS telling me which way to go. I'm very much one of those people who would just drive it straight into the lake if that's what it tells me. So for sure, I worry about that. But let me give something sort of totally unrelated. There was recently it's a draft law that was passed in Europe called the, let's see, I don't get the name wrong. It is the the Cloud and AI Development Act. And it goes to a concept called digital sovereignty. Europe is very worried right now about trying to get off of non-European technology, reduce their dependence on it, especially, honestly, US-based technology. I don't think anyone knows how this will go. They've got a long way from here to there. But if this happens, if the concept of digital sovereignty really takes hold, both short-term and long-term, I think it could be very disruptive to the way companies operate, the way AI is developed and deployed. So in the short term, what this law would do is require European public sector customers to essentially, in many situations, stop buying non-European tech, at least for higher assessment levels. It's probably going to be influential on the private sector too. So in that short term, what might happen is that European organizations are going to struggle because they're going to not have access to some of the best AI technology. In the longer term, depending on how effective that is, it could be very problematic for US organizations, which have more difficulty actually selling their technology in Europe. And what you might have is very fragmentation of the market, where different geographic regions sort of become silos of AI technology. And I think that could have some negative consequences for everyone. So something to keep an eye on, right? It's not exactly an ethics concern, but I think it implements everything, or could affect everything we do with AI.
Well, Sandeep, Shiva, Deepak, Joseph, great conversation. Thank you for the valuable insights, and thank you also for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for this. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure having.
And thank you again to our great partners at Informatica from Salesforce, as well as to you, our CDM Media audience. Until next time on our next Intellectiv conversation, have a great rest of your day. Bye now.